Hi, so today I'll be talking about the music and character relations in Schubert's and Richard's Erlking. So I decided to change the topic for my proposal, so I'll be explaining how some of the choices these two composers made in their music depicts the characters and, in a sense, the text. Okay, so I'll begin with a poem summary. It was written in 1728 as a collection by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, who is a German poet. There are four characters: a narrator, Elf King, a father, and his little boy. The Elf King is a mythical character that children can typically see, but not their parents. So the Elf King is believed that if he touches you, you will die. There is a young boy and his father riding on a horse through the night trying to get home in the forest. And the little boy suddenly sees the Elf King and later on his daughters. The Elf King offers six temptations to the little boy, and the little boy is constantly saying, my father, can't you see him?" Or the Elf King is doing this, but the father can't see anything, and he's just trying to reassure his son by saying, "It's just mist," or "It's just the wind." But the father realizes that the boy is telling the truth, and that because when they get home, the little boy is dead in his arms. So begin with Schubert's version. It is the most well-known and performed piece version of this poem, and it was composed in 1815 when he was 18 years old. The performers are for both versions actually one male vocalist and a pianist. But what's interesting is that Schubert wrote the male singer to cover more ranges than Richards, because Richards is just one register. The narrator is middle, young boy is upper to reflect his young age and innocence. The father is low, and the Earl King is middle to more like kind of seduce or tempt the little boy to come with him. Okay, so the pianist is used to help set the mood, atmosphere, and create the setting. So the keys that they modulate to are mainly G minor, B flat major, C minor, F major, B minor, G major, C major, A minor, and D minor. The main progression is a 1 to 5, but the most probably common progression in G minor is 1, 2 half diminished, 6, 5, some sort of applied chord. It might be a German, um, French, and then or a 7 diminished 7 to a cadential 6, 4. Um, Schubert used a lot of pedal notes in his music, and they're all highlighted in neon green. But two interesting chords, actually three, that we learned this semester is Neapolitan 6, which is found towards the end of the piece as a pedal note. It helps create suspense, anticipation, and like kind of hope that the young boy will survive in the end, but later we discover that he doesn't. And French and German chords. French is used in second inversion of a cadential 6/4 on the first page, and German is used strangely in root position, going to a regular 7 diminished 7 of 5, but that is not cadential 6/4, which is also strange because German would usually go to actually would have to go 6/4. So music and character relations. Excerpt 1 is on the first system first page. The G triplet here represents the horse kind of galloping, and then the on the second bar we have the triplets and then the arpeggiated G minor triad. That represents kind of like the wind going and then coming back. So that's also like the theme of the piece because we have that pattern recurring all the time. It's just that it's in different keys and different notes. Here too, the second triplet, the C D E flat, it's technically a 4 minor 4 triad, but I did not mark it as a 4 chord because 4 would technically go to 5, but then it doesn't really because it's just a 1/6/4 and we don't really use 1/6/4 that often. So excerpt 2 is top of third page, B flat major, because the Earl King needs to sound like happy, cheerful to try to lure the boy in. Um, the squares and the circles represent similar patterns. We have chords. The first we see an example of a pedal note here, the B flat. And one thing that I was surprised to see is that there are no six chords after a 5 or 5/7. I thought there would be because 5 to 6 is a deceptive cadence, and the Earl King is deceiving, trying to deceive the young boy to follow him, but Schubert doesn't include any deceptive cadence really. Um, the chords here are very simple: 5/7/1, 5/7/1, 5/1. It's because Schubert wants to create things like as simple as possible, since if the more chords he uses, then the more it complicates the music, which wouldn't really be appealing if you're trying to like lure someone in. The next excerpt is about the young boy kind of singing in more gradual increasing like higher pitched notes. So I only included one example here, but if you see in the score later on, we have the little boy starting off with a C, and then later on he sings, I think, to an F. This is to every time Schubert actually used a smart technique for this. He decided to have the little boy sing a note higher and higher every time to show his increase of fear and anxiety, which I think is pretty clever. Um, Another thing I noticed is that Schubert uses a lot of minor second intervals in his piece. For example, when the little boy sings B natural to C, D to E flat, those are all minor seconds. This is to show that he's obviously on edge in his fear, has a lot of fear. Excerpt 4, it is not marked in the music, but the male vocalist who, when singing the father's part, should sing in a very legato and calm style. Sometimes he begins singing in a major key, but then later on it modulates to, I believe, a minor key. And it is to show, to like kind of reassure the son, saying like everything's okay, this is just like your imagination or it's just the wind. And then excerpt 5 is just a small thing that I noticed, but Schubert doesn't include the vocalist in the very last measure of this piece. I think it's to create a more dramatic effect because it is a imperfect authentic cadence at the end, which creates a dramatic closing to this piece. The Richards version is way shorter than Schubert's. It's like 1 minute 30 seconds, I believe. Finding the sheet music for this was quite challenging, and I only found one version of the sheet music. The excerpt, what's interesting about this piece is that Richard only uses 1, 5, and 5/7 with the occasional like 6, major 6, and that's unapplied, or he uses Italian chords, at least what I believe. Excerpt 1, it is an applied chord of 6. At first I thought it was 3, but it doesn't make sense because the soprano would be do ti la, and it would usually be coming from a 6, a minor 6 interval, but it comes from a 5. One reason also why I know it could be a 6 is because 5 to 6 is a deceptive cadence. Deceptive, here's where Schubert didn't include the deceptive cadence, but Richard did. I think it's probably the same reason to show, to lure the boy in. Deceptive cadence, the third has a double, so we have B flat, D, D, F. We see that the D is doubled, which makes sense. And excerpt 2, this is the way that the vocalist sings, because the version is way shorter and more condensed than Schubert's, and the pianist doesn't do that much, with the accompanist having like very straightforward notes, and the notes are all like pretty much eighth notes and detached. There's really not much to show the different characters, but I think Richard uses more, focuses more on the singing style, whereas Schubert's version is more melodic and can easily express the different characters. So we have a term called Singstimme. I could be saying it wrong. That means singing voice, which I believe it means cantabile, if so, more of like a singing style. And what's interesting is that it's marked here pianissimo, but then other passages are marked piano. I believe this could be because the Earl King wants to try to sound as calm and like as peaceful as he can to attract the boy to follow him, or rather to commit suicide. Okay, so comparing Schubert's and Richard's version of Earl King, both wrote is based on the poem, Goethe's poem, and both begins and ends in G minor, both uses authentic cadence, and both includes an augmented chord in the score. Schubert uses German and French, but Richard uses only Italian. Differences is that one, Richard's is way shorter than Schubert's. The singing styles are similar, but it is more important in Richard's, as we mentioned. And Richard's version is a lot more simple than Schubert's. His version only stays in G minor, with the occasional modulation to D minor because there's C sharp, but it's only for 2 bars, so I don't think it was really a modulation. I think it's just more of like an applied chord. Schubert modulates multiple keys, both major and minor. No piano introduction in Richards, so the singer and piano start together right away. And Richards is a bit harder to decipher. The vocalist needs to use more motions to play out forward parts, but on the other hand, Schubert had the piano to tell more of the dramatic parts. Yeah, so that is pretty much it. Thank you.